Hey folks, hope you all are doing well. I'm Karan Bandal from Econosite, your weekly wrap on economic news from India and around the world. So let's get started. Fears of a severe recession deepen as European business activity slows on surging energy costs. European business activity took a major hit in the month of October, reporting the steepest loss in output since April 2013, excluding pandemic lockdowns. High inflation driven by high energy cost and wage pressures are holding the firms back. The Eurozone's flash composite purchasing managers index fell from 48.1 in September to 47.1 in October. Now, if you watch our weekly wraps, you know that a PMI under 50 represents a contraction in activity. Here we are not only seeing a contraction but an acceleration in downward trend in business activity of Eurozone. This is the 19-member European bloc, by the way. The European Central Bank said in September that the 19-member bloc is set to grow 3.1% this year and 0.9% in 2023. But with the latest PMI reading, these forecasts may have to be adjusted down further. Growth may be even lower than what ECB projected in September. Manufacturing activity led the losses, but services output also dropped for third consecutive month. In terms of national breakdown, business activity in France stagnated, coming from 51.2 in September to 50 in October. Business activity in Germany came in at 44.1 against 45.7 last month. A lot of German manufacturing is dependent on Russian gas supplies. So the Russia-Ukraine war is causing German business activity to spiral down. And again, PMI under 50 is contraction, PMI at 50 is stagnation. Melanie Dabono, a senior economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics, said that the latest data point to a German recession as the energy shock is increasingly hitting the real economy. This negative sentiment is reflecting in the currency market as well. The euro lost ground against the US dollar, trading at $0.982, registering a 13.85% drop year to date. During the upcoming meeting of the ECB, European Central Bank, on Thursday, they are expected to raise the rates by 75 basis points. This would be the third consecutive increase to the main rate in the Eurozone. 50 basis points hike in July, 75 basis points jump in September, and the expected third hike on Thursday for another 75 basis points. The main rate is currently sitting at 0.75%. With the third hike this Thursday, it is expected to go to 1.5%. They did end up raising it to 1.5%, by the way. And further hikes are expected to push this to 2% by the end of this year. On a related note, main rate in the US is expected to go to 4% by the end of this year. Euro area annual inflation is at 9.9% in September. As long as inflation stays elevated, ECB has no other choice but to keep hiking rates to control the decade high inflation. Currency is getting hammered, business activity is slowing, and the rates are still being hiked, which will further dampen the business activity. It is difficult to imagine a scenario where Germany in particular escapes a recession, and Eurozone may not grow as fast as ECB projected in September of this year. Let's look at one of the Asia's major economy. South Korea's economy likely ground to near halt in Q3. For the export-led economy of South Korea, Q3 GDP is expected to be up 0.1% against the previous quarter and up 2.8% compared with the last year. This is according to the median forecast of 21 economists. 2 days later, official numbers came out. Actual growth came out at 0.3% against the previous quarter and 3.1% against last year. Better than expected, but still anemic. Growth slowdown is due to reduced consumption, weakness in exports, and weakness in manufacturing production. This is likely to get worse amid the deteriorating global scenario. Bank of Korea has also hiked interest rate aggressively to curb a decade high inflation. In October, Bank of Korea raised its benchmark interest rate by 50 basis points to 3%. Again, to compare, currently main rate in the US is 3.25% and main rate in the Eurozone is 1.5%. As rightly put by Bansi Madhavani, a senior economist at ANZ, looking ahead, weakening export prospects, elevated domestic inflation, rising debt servicing burdens, and tightening policy all points to intensifying growth headwinds. It's the same story almost everywhere in the Western and advanced economies. We talked about slowing business activity in Eurozone, a key player in Asia struggling and slowing down. Let's come to the US. Let's talk about 4 high frequency indicators of the US economy: air travel, movie ticket sales, hotel occupancy, and gas consumption, that is diesel and petrol consumption. Let's start with number 1, air travel. This data is provided by TSA, Transportation Security Administration, as of October 23, 2022. It shows 7-day average of daily traveler throughput for each year from 2019 to now. Simply put, we are seeing air travel activity in the US for each year from 2019. 2019 is our base year for comparison because COVID was not an issue in 2019 in the US. Everything was functioning as normal. This is pre-pandemic level of activity. So we will compare everything against the 2019 level, which is shown by the solid light blue line right here on the chart. COVID became a problem in US in early 2020 and the president at the time declared national emergency sometime in March of 2020, which brought everything to a grinding halt at least for some time. So look at the 2020 levels of activity, the black line. You can see air travel plummeting around April, and it slowly tried to recover but stayed well below the air travel activity if you compare it with pre-pandemic level. Now last year, 2021, solid blue line. You can see it is much better than the air travel activity in 2020, but still well below the pre-pandemic level of air travel. And this year so far, you can see is shown in red. Air travel activity improved further from 2021, but again, it is lagging behind the air travel activity that was there pre-pandemic. To be specific, US air travel this year is still down 3.9% from what it was in 2019. Number 2, look at movie ticket sales or domestic box office in the US. This data is from Box Office Mojo through October 20, 2022. Dashed blue line shows the box office, domestic box office for each week and the median for the years 2016 through 2019. We will treat this as pre-pandemic activity level and use it as a baseline for our comparison. You can see in 2020, black line, around March, April, the box office crashed and never recovered all year long. If you look at last year, 2021, blue solid line, we can see slight improvement for the first 3 quarters. In the last quarter of 2021, there is a glimpse of box office activity trying to reach the pre-pandemic levels, but still it remained well below what it was pre-pandemic. And this year so far, if you look at the red line for 2022, you can see for 5 weeks the box office was higher than pre-pandemic level, but overall it is still below the pre-pandemic box office. Number 3, look at hotel occupancy rate. This data provided by STR Smith Travel Research is through October 15th, 2022 and shows the 4-week average for occupancy rate. Basically, how busy were hotels since 2019, how many people were traveling for work or vacation and staying in hotels in the US. Look at the purple dotted line, hotel occupancy rate during 2019. Again, we will use this as our baseline for comparison. You can see in 2020, the black line, hotel occupancy rate plummeted around April, recovered a little as the months went by, but remained at almost half the pre-pandemic levels. 2021 dashed blue line showed a strong recovery April onwards, but was still well below pre-pandemic levels. And this year, hotel occupancy rate, you can see with the red line, is even better than last year, but it is tracking just below pre-pandemic levels of activity again. Finally, number 4, look at gas consumption in the US or petrol or diesel consumption. This is weekly data from the US Energy Information Administration, EIA. Here also, we will use 2019 as our base year for comparison. You can see with the black dotted line. We will compare gas consumption or supplied gas for each year from 2020 and onwards against what was supplied in 2019. So 2019 supplies will be shown as 100%, as you can see with a flat black dotted line at 100%. In 2020, again around April, gas supplies tanked. They recovered slowly to about 90% of pre-pandemic levels by the end of the year. Last year in 2021, this purple line, gas supplies stayed well below pre-pandemic levels during the first half. In the second half, on average, I visually see gas consumption activity very closely matching the pre-pandemic gas consumption. But for the entire year, still tracking below 2019 levels. This year so far, with the red line, we can see gas consumption below pre-pandemic levels, even below what it was last year. Point being, with a strong economic recovery and growth in the US, with US growing at 2.6% in the last quarter, better than expected, these 4 high-frequency indicators of the US economy are still not back to pre-pandemic levels of activity. And now the Eurozone is slowing, as evident by falling PMIs in Germany and France. Asian giant South Korea has slowed. China has slowed, growing only 3.9% in Q3 2022. Our world today is interdependent, interconnected. And it looks like everyone is slowing down at the same time. I'm sure this will also affect India's economy and exports in a negative manner. So let's see how the Q3 of this year goes. I wonder when will we as a global economy make a complete recovery from the damage that COVID inflicted. I hope you enjoyed this week's wrap. I will speak with you again next week. Until then, take care.